Hello everyone, welcome to the third webinar session in the Meet Melbourne 2020 online series. Today's webinar session is going to be covering the law discipline at Melbourne University, specifically the Melbourne JD. These webinars are part of a series running across May covering all Melbourne undergraduate courses and disciplines. My name is Paul, I'm from the Melbourne Law School, and today I'll be your moderator, your host, your captain for this evening, and I'll be taking you through what it's like to study the JD and a little bit more about the program. Before we sort of get through everything, we'll go through and we'll do what we like to do here at University of Melbourne is an acknowledgement to country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, the University of Melbourne acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you people out there in the remote land, streaming in from your dining room, your study perhaps, or your pantry, wherever you may be. Welcome. We're getting people coming in from all around Australia and also overseas. So a warm welcome to our overseas as well as our Australian listeners. So welcome. Now, I should also mention that the webinar will be recorded and can be accessed afterwards, just like all our others. So please, there's no need to take notes. Please feel free if you do, but please just enjoy and listen to what our panel has to say, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of it. There is also a chat window that's just there on your side of your computer. You might actually see that. Now, in that chat webinar, you can sort of just add your questions in. There is a team that's working off screen for the duration of the webinar that will answer your questions as we go. There will be time for questions towards the end after we have our little panel session with our panel guests. So, the way that the session's running today, we're going to be going through basically just a bit of an overview of what the Melbourne JD is. So basically, just giving you a taste of what the program is. Then what we'll do is we'll then go to our panel. Now, on our panel, as you might probably see, we have Isabella and Nathan. So Isabella is a second-year student and Nathan is a recent Melbourne JD graduate. So we'll be able to go through and ask them some questions about their experience in the Melbourne JD. And then obviously we'll be able to take questions afterwards. So let's get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and give you a very quick 5-minute overview on what the Melbourne JD is, give it a bit more of I guess the flavour and discipline, a bit about the discipline, and kind of set the tone for this evening. So basically, why law at Melbourne? Basically, why would anyone want to come across and do a Melbourne JD? And why do our students come in and do a Melbourne Juris Doctor? Why do they choose to do it? The big thing that's, I guess, a big driver for a lot of our students is the career opportunities that the JD gives. At the moment, we sit at a 98% graduate employment outcome. Students want to come across and do the JD because they have an opportunity to actually go off and have a great career and a strong career, build on their undergraduate degree. The other second point that a lot of students sort of mention when they come across and want to sort of come and do the JD is the intellectual challenge. The JD is an intellectually challenging course. It's academically rigorous. It will push you. Students who really like that challenge and want to be pushed really get the most out of a JD and really enjoy the program. The third reason why a lot of students come and do a JD is they want to make a difference. These are the students that want to build on their undergraduate skills, come across and do law, and then go out there and help others or help set up new policies and sort of help other people and organisations. It's all about making a difference to the community and the organisations. And the last reason why a lot of students come across to the Melbourne JD is it's because it's rated as the #1 law school in Australia. Now, a lot of students who want to do law, they want to come to the best law school. And Melbourne University's law school is up there with that. We are quite well known, regarded both in Australia and internationally. So they're the main reasons why students sort of tend to come across and do the Melbourne JD at the University of Melbourne. So we go to the next slide. And what I want to sort of go through is just a little bit of the nitty-gritty of a Melbourne JD. The one thing I sort of talked about, and again will mention, is that 98 employment outcome, 98% graduate outcomes. Now that's quite important because I guess with law, you know, you're putting in a big commitment and time to do this particularly intense sort of program, and you want some great outcomes. Melbourne Law School is one of the only universities in Australia that gladly goes out and promotes and actually lists its graduate outcomes. Every year we put those out. So we're quite proud of those graduate outcomes, and they're quite good to sort of have. And when you go into a program such as the Melbourne JD, it's always great to know that there are some strong opportunities for careers at the end of that. The other great thing about the JD is its whole enrichment program. It's basically a smorgasbord of all these type of things that you can actually do. So everything from an initial orientation where we really bring students in and we really go through everything that's what's, you know, preparing them for this 3 years of study that's going to be quite intense. We've got academic skill support, things like to help students with legal writing, reading. We have a mentor program where students can be partnered with our alumni who work in industry. They can go to those alumni and ask them questions, get advice about different types of, I guess, careers in law, or how they should approach things. We also have things like mooting competitions, which is like practice trials or pretend trials, where students can sort of pit their skills against each other and presenting cases. We have great international opportunities such as dual degrees, exchange and international subjects. And we have also students are able to get individual career support. There is a careers person, a careers team that actually helps students prepare their resume and prepare how they would go out into the workforce and apply for legal positions. We also have hands-on learning. We have a lot of internship subjects in the public interest law space, where students can go out and apply the skills they learn in classroom out in the real workforce. And we also have public lectures from leading international lawyers. The law school has a great reputation and it attracts a lot of international lawyers and dignitaries that come here and actually present to our law, I guess, our law fraternity. So we'll go to the next slide, and what we'll have a look now is that we'll go into the, I guess, the other little bits about the JD. Basically, the JD pretty much with the Melbourne Juris Doctor, it prepares you for admission into legal practice. So it will prepare you to become a lawyer here in Australia and some parts of different parts of the world. So our degree is recognised not only in Australia, but also in Singapore, Malaysia, the US, Canada. So there are opportunities to take that program overseas. Now, the basic structure of a Juris Doctor, it can range from it's basically a 3-year program, but you can extend it to 3 or 4 years. Students can also accelerate the JD to 2.5 years with approval, but I've never met a JD student who has actually done that. There are 16 compulsory subjects and 8 elective subjects. So basically, in order to actually apply for a Melbourne Juris Doctor, you must have an undergraduate degree in any discipline other than law. And secondly, if you do have a law degree, you must have it from a different legal system. So for example, if you did come across, for say, China or other parts of the world like France, then basically you can apply for the Melbourne JD as well. So we're going to the next slide, and what we're going to do, if we can look at the structure of the JD. So basically, what we have 3 years. The red subjects are the compulsory subjects I was referring to before. So we have 16 compulsory subjects. Then we have the subjects in blue, which are elective. So there are elective subjects. So each student must complete all the compulsory subjects and also 8 elective subjects, and that forms the basis of a Juris Doctor. Now, if we go to the next slide, we'll look at the electives that students can actually do. At the moment, students can select from 50 different types of JD electives, and those subjects include murder, negotiations, new technology law, patents, all the way through to law, commercial arbitration. Students also have the option of choosing one Melbourne Law Masters elective, and this subject is taken from the Melbourne Law Masters program. And students can take subjects in, say, climate change law, human rights law, blockchain and cryptocurrency. There's a lot there to choose from. Basically, you're looking at 100 electives that students have a choice of actually selecting their electives from. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk more about the selection process and what it actually involves. So there's basically two ways to enter the Juris Doctor. As I mentioned, the first way is general entry. So if you go to the next slide, we'll show you exactly what that general entry is all about. This is where basically 95% of our students enter the Juris Doctor. So basically what we look at is academic performance in previous tertiary study and the law school admissions test, or the LSAT. Now, we take students from any discipline, and I mean any discipline. So students can come across from everything from arts, from dance, from design, from commerce, from science. We select students from any undergraduate degree. And also what we also use is we use an LSAT, which is the law admissions test. Now, this test is run by LSAT, which is an external governing body. What they do is there's a test that runs, and it doesn't test for any legal knowledge, but just tests for things like comprehension, reasoning, those sort of things. So when we sort of look at an application, we look at the academic performance of the student and their LSAT score. And together, using both those I guess, mechanisms, we actually determine whether or not you get a place in the Melbourne JD. If you go to the next slide, what we also have, the other alternative, is a guaranteed entry. Now, this is more applicable to Australian students studying the Australian VCE or HSC system, where students can come in with a particular score and be able to be admitted to the Juris Doctor. Now, that particular that information can be found on our study website, and for those people who want to go in for more of a deep dive into that, you can actually do that. So that brings us on to our next part of the panel session, and this is where we talk to Isabella and Nathan. So basically, what I sort of gave you there was a very quick sort of, I guess, a little snapshot of the Melbourne Juris Doctor, or sort of what to expect. It was just a very quick overview. If you really want that deep dive, you can go into our study website and really sort of go in there granularly and find out a little bit more about the program, particularly about the particular subjects you'll be studying and what side, and there's things like internships and other bits and pieces as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open it up to this panel discussion. And with Isabella and Nathan, we're going to talk a little bit more about their JD experience. So let's introduce Isabella first. Isabella is a second-year law student. Prior to studying at JD, she completed a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Melbourne, majoring in politics and international relations with a diploma in French. Bonsoir, mademoiselle. She is currently the director of the Careers and Development Portfolio in the Melbourne Law School, and worked with the paralegal and legal tech startup. She was interested in intellectual property, the intersection between law and technology, and the Asian legal systems. She plans to undertake an exchange in Shanghai, China during her final year of the JD. Welcome, Isabella.
Thank you for having me.
And next we have Nathan. Nathan is a law graduate at HWL Epsworth Lawyers in Melbourne. He graduated from the University of Melbourne with a Bachelor of Arts, majoring in psychology and criminology, and recently graduated from the Juris Doctor program in December last year. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great, and fresh out of the JD2 and now working, so that's a great sort of thing there. So basically what I wanted to do is talk to you guys a bit about the JD, but mainly about, I guess, what we're looking at is the experience of the JD, because we hear a lot of students out there talking and sort of having these perceptions about what the JD is like, the type of student that goes there, those sort of things. So I just want to ask you a few bits and pieces of some questions about your experience of the JD, and hopefully give, I guess, the audience playing at home a little bit more information about what it actually is like studying the JD. So let's start with our first question. Isabella, this one's for you, I guess, and we'll bring it out to Nathan. Now, tell us how you became interested in law. Isabella, would you want to start off first?
Yeah, of course. So I think my interest in law has been twofold. Firstly, law has always been an interest for me, since high school, and I think it was compounded by the fact that I was also a bit of an all-rounder at school, and I was particularly attracted to law in terms of the career opportunities that it provides insofar as it's a very versatile and adaptable degree. I mean, law pervades every industry, and I found it really attractive that you could enter into careers in law that span both the private and public sector. And I think what was the nail in the coffin were doing electives in my undergraduate studies that were essentially law subjects. And I had one particular professor who was particularly passionate about her subject, was legal language. And yeah, that was really inspiring to see. And as I really enjoyed the subject as well, it made me really driven to pursue law.
Great. Nathan, how about you? Tell us how you became interested in law.
Yeah, well, I guess my interest sort of started in high school. I ended up taking legal studies when I was in the final years of high school, and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do after I finished. So I just studied a general arts degree at Melbourne Uni and ended up taking some law electives, but I still wasn't really sure. So I actually applied for volunteer positions, and one of the volunteer positions was in a community legal centre as a receptionist. And when I paired that with studying electives at uni, I realised that I quite enjoyed the style of work. And also, as Isabella said, I realised that it was a subject matter or an area that I could work in that was kind of diverse, no matter what I ended up doing with my studies. So that's sort of how I became interested and just developed an interest further from some practical experience too.
So what I noticed there, no one said watching an episode of Suits or Law and Order influenced you in any way?
Legally Blonde, for sure.
Yes, no, Suits, yes, but not as much as you would think.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, the next question, I guess, is why did you decide to study a JD over an LLB? Like specifically, a lot of you guys kind of had that interest in I guess, in high school. And you had the choice of maybe going out and doing a regular LLB. Why did you not decide to go that particular route? Why did you come across and study a JD over an LLB? Nathan, perhaps we can start with you on that one.
Sure. Well, I guess, as I said, I was really unsure during the final years of high school and even after it of what I actually wanted to do. And I thought it would be probably better to try and work that out first before committing to a degree like a law degree that's so intellectually stimulating and rigorous. And the other thing is, once I started kind of going on that path, I realized that it was probably better to approach a law degree as a postgraduate student. So like as a Juris Doctor student in Melbourne, because I would have already built some of the skills that would allow me to study effectively, read critically, read lengthy cases, all that sort of written and language skill set that you would develop from like the end of high school and further on in your studies at a university.
Right. Isabella, how about you?
Yeah, I would similarly echo that as well. I think I look back now in hindsight and I'm really grateful for the opportunities I got to explore my undergraduate degree and to really figure out whether or not I really wanted to do law. I mean, it's a huge commitment, especially the JD. And I think, starting the JD with undergraduate skills, like Nathan mentioned, I guess refining your critical and writing skills and research skills, those are skills that you don't really develop and hone as much straight out of high school. And I think starting the JD with an undergraduate degree under your belt really sets you up quite well. I mean, I've had friends who started, law straight out of high school, and for them it was quite difficult, and I think they didn't enjoy it as much because I think for most people, or perhaps some people, law is like quite a safe degree to jump into straight out of high school. But often I find that it takes time and it takes, skills that you need kind of to develop over your undergraduate studies that will set you up well.
And I think that's a really good, and I think that's a really good point for both of you. Yeah.
I was
And
also
I
going to add
think,
as
sorry.
sorry. No, sorry, I was going to add as well. I also think it was the reputation of the law school, to be honest. I knew that Melbourne Law School ranked quite highly in terms of just, those university rankings that you see. And yeah, I felt like if I wanted to do law, I wanted to do it at yeah, a really great institution. So yeah, I haven't looked back since.
Great. Well, I guess the point is, from what you kind of both have sort of said, it's being able to sort of really immerse yourself in an undergraduate degree and really kind of build those skill sets up a bit and really kind of just spend those 3 years just looking and working on, I guess, studying an area you're generally interested in, really want to sort of excel in. And as you said, sort of, Nathan, building those skills. So when you do jump across into a JD, you're kind of a little bit more on your feet. You sort of, you've got a little bit more under your belt, sort of, so to speak. So the next question I have, we all understand and we all know the Melbourne JD is an academically rigorous course. It's intellectually challenging. We have a lot of students that basically, say it's one of the most hardest things that they've ever done, but the most rewarding thing that they've ever done. So with that in mind, I guess, what is the most challenging, or what was the most challenging aspect of studying at the Melbourne JD? Isabella, perhaps we can start with you on this one.
For sure. I think to me, it's balance. Obviously, study is a priority and you want to do well academically, but I think a big part of the JED is also rounding yourself off with skills that you might need in future. So whether that's competitions, so the law school offers an array of incredible competitions you can participate in as a student, whether that's mooting that Paul touched on just before. So that's essentially like a mock trial, not a mock trial, but you're essentially arguing as if you're in a court, whether that's client negotiations or witness interviews. Yeah, these are incredible opportunities you can take on as a student. So I think it's juggling academia, juggling volunteering as well. So I paralegal as a volunteer at a legal tech startup, and that's been fantastic. But I think, on top of trying to manage and stay on good grades as well as balancing with your other commitments, it can be quite difficult. And I feel like the JD is also quite all-consuming as well. So I think being able to balance your studies and your extracurricular commitments, but also maintaining, the social life as well. That's a really big part of the JD. It's a great community, and yeah, it's definitely difficult to balance it all, but I think it takes time and a lot of practice.
Nathan, how about yourself? The most challenging thing?
Yeah, well, Isabella literally took the words out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say is probably the hardest, giving yourself permission to balance studying the degree with extracurricular activities, with a social life, with, pursuing your hobbies in your downtime. And it is a balancing act, but I think it's definitely doable for all students. Like Isabella, when I was studying the JD, I volunteered. I was on the Law Institute of Victoria's Young Lawyers Committee as a secretary. I worked as well, a part-time job, and I studied. So it was a lot of diarising. It was a lot of time spent planning, but in the end, like it's a doable task to do this degree. It's just, as Isabella so rightly said, it's a challenge to balance it all.
So how many hours a week would you commit to a JD, roughly, give or take? Because that's one question I get asked all the time. It's like how many hours is it? Do I spend a week doing the Melbourne JD? Is there like is there kind of an indication of how many hours you would do? This is just contact hours, I would say, and I guess all the other bits and pieces.
I'd say, I mean, it's a lot. I'd say, especially in the climate of COVID-19 as well, the hours between work and study study and leisure time tends to blur. But I'd say I spend a good portion of my day studying, if not for my other commitments involved, either as part of the Melbourne Law Student Society or working as a paralegal. But I'd say I commit around like maybe 4 or 5 hours a day to study. I'd say that's on average in a week per day, but I don't know. What do you think, Nathan? I think it varies quite a bit as well, depending on exam season as well, or yeah, other commitments that come up.
Yeah, I mean, I have to think back a little bit further than you do, but I would agree with that. It does vary, but I used to spend most of my evenings studying, which by that term I mean if there was an assignment due, I would write some of it or research it, as well as doing my actual homework, which was to try and read cases or read textbook chapters that were assigned. So yeah, 4 to 5 hours per day was probably about right, but I would also quite frankly spend a large proportion of my weekend reviewing or finessing what I had written for assignments, because personally my part-time jobs were Monday to Friday because they were in an office. So I had that time, but there were definitely portions of the degree where I had retail jobs in first year where I worked on the weekend. So I just had to slot the hours late at night, early in the morning, you know, around whatever sporadic schedule I was working off of. But 4 to 5 sounds average from memory.
Yeah, I definitely have to say though, I don't know if you felt this, Nathan, but I do feel like I've been able to study better, you know, like compared to my first year at least. I think studying law in itself is a skill set, and quite different to how you would study, I'd say, like in year 12 or in high school or even an undergraduate degree. You really do refine how you take notes, how you read. I guess mostly for efficiency, but you also want to get the most out of your profession. So I think that's a skill that I'm still refining, to be frank. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where the more you give into it, the more you get out of it.
Yeah, I really 100% agree.
And we should also mention that's 4 to 5 hours a night on top of your class contact hours as well. So it's not just 4 or 5 hours just doing the JDs, also there's contact hours too. And I guess, as you sort of say, Isabella, around exam time, that sort of goes up and I guess kind of fluctuates and sort of comes down. But you guys also touched that there is an opportunity to actually have somewhat of a life with the Melbourne JD, because I think, a lot of students, as you sort of allude to, it is a very intense program and you are pushed. But I'm assuming there is a life while you are studying a JD, or is that just vicious rumor?
No, there definitely is a life. Definitely is a life. I think the best part about the JD is the community, to be frank. I think my perception of law school initially, I wasn't afraid, but I think what I'd heard from people who had studied law previously was that it's a very competitive environment, and it is. But I didn't expect the community to be so supportive and loving and open. And I really do lean a lot on my friends, especially in the years above as well. I think that, you know, students who have paved the way already, it really does help to lean on others, and you'd be surprised at how much, help people are willing to give.
Yeah, I would agree. I think in hindsight, one of the real strengths of the Melbourne JD is that you are essentially, before COVID, you were attending classes all the time and you were in a class size that was manageable with your friends, and it took the support of one another to, quite frankly, pass and get through the subjects. And I think it's a testament to the way the course is set up, because at first, much like Isabella, I was petrified of going to this postgraduate degree and thinking, oh dear, it's going to be so competitive. It's just going to be I'll be out of my depth. But in reality, once you settle in after the first couple of weeks, you quickly find your stride, and you find, as Isabella said, you know, a way to look at other students who have paved the way and passed in previous years, and you sort of take cues from that and learn by example from your peers. So yeah, it's good in that aspect for sure.
And I think you guys sort of, where you guys mentioned that kind of cohort experience where you're in that kind of group, that small group that actually helps you through the whole 3 years that you're doing it. And I guess it's almost like people sort of describe it back as almost going back to high school, where you've got this smaller group. I guess going back to high school without all the negative stuff, like the awkwardness and the, you know, and living life as a teenager probably. But would that be a fair assumption, that kind of small classes, it's that tight-knit community, that's something that kind of gets you through it all?
Definitely, definitely. It's definitely high school without the bad parts. Everyone's more mature now, and because you're in an environment with like-minded individuals, it's really rich environment to be in, to be frank. It also really helps that your teachers, you know, I think it's not as intimidating to go up to them, I think, as I think I was back in high school, even my undergraduate degree. Your teachers are really great support, I guess, people to support you during the JD. And yeah, it's particularly amazing that the teachers we have at the JD are those of incredible caliber, whether you're talking about previous barristers or current legal practitioners. Yeah, the talent is incredible.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, even now I work with colleagues who went who to law school but didn't have the same experience of closeness that I found I had at the Melbourne JD. And also, to build on what Isabella just said, there are a lot of people that I come across in private practice in my job who were actually my teachers because they're barristers, and that's also kind of interesting to have things come full circle, and sort of see them in action in real life when they taught you contract law 2 years ago. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it helps that the legal community itself is quite small. I think I've been surprised at how small it is. I mean, I'm sure you can speak more on this, Nathan, now that you're working, but yeah, I often hear that that's the case, and I think because of that, people are quite supportive of each other.
Yeah, I can tell you now, I definitely run at least, well, before the pandemic, I used to run into people from my cohort and law school year levels above and below. I would say at least 5 times a day, 5 different people on the streets of Melbourne. It is a very tight-knit community, and yeah, the degree definitely is well known. Let's put it that way.
Okay, which brings me back to my next question, is basically what surprised you about the Melbourne JD? What was something about the JD you didn't sort of expect when you sort of came in for your 3-year hard slog? Nathan, perhaps start with you this time.
Okay. I think honestly, I wasn't really prepared for how many different doors this degree opens. And what I mean by this is I came into law school thinking, I'll just take some electives to fill up the degree, and they're just going to be probably your stock standard, tax law, intellectual property, by the way, which I loved, but there are many different international placements that you can do for set amounts of time. The university in general and the law school more specifically also partner with a lot of community organizations, a lot of not-for-profits, organizations to do with government, to do with regulatory bodies, both here, interstate, and external to Australia. And I didn't really know that coming in as a student, and I was pleasantly surprised. And I think it's important for those of you listening to the webinar to know that this degree extends beyond the reaches of Melbourne as a city. It extends literally worldwide and across every continent.
Isabella, how about you? What surprised you about Melbourne, studying the Melbourne JD?
Yeah, I think I definitely echo Nathan's comments. I think the opportunities that the JD affords you, particularly the international ones. I've always been interested in traveling and international opportunities, and would love to work internationally at some point. And yeah, I think the plethora of partnerships that the Melbourne Law School has with so many overseas universities and institutions is quite frankly incredible. I was lucky enough to sneak in some traveling with the law school before COVID, where I studied economic and business law in Shanghai for 2 weeks. And that was genuinely ranging, and I think that has now equipped me with desire to work in Asian legal systems and potentially in China. But like I wouldn't have known about that, I guess, passion if not for this subject, and I guess the opportunity to travel abroad and see the law in action. So yeah, I think the opportunities that the JD affords was really surprising and definitely incredible.
Okay, great. So basically, as we sort of wrap up this little panel discussions before we take some questions, I'd like to sort of ask you guys, what advice do you have for students wanting to study law, and perhaps particularly in Melbourne JD? What sort of advice do you think you would give you? I guess kind of giving, if you had your time again and knowing what you knew now, what sort of advice would you give yourself? I guess in Isabella in Year 12. What would that advice be? Isabella, start with you first.
Of course. I think do your research. The JD is very intense, and I think to do well, you need to have a genuine interest in the law. Otherwise, I think it will be quite difficult to stay motivated. So I think really look into yourself and look into what you want to study. And if you are driven to study law, definitely study the Melbourne JD. I can't recommend the degree any higher, to be honest. The opportunities that I've had, the people that I've met, it's an incredible environment to be in and a great privilege as well. But I think before you get there, I think you need to really evaluate, I guess, your interest and how, I guess, where you see yourself in the future, because it is very intense, and I think you do need that interest to be able to drive you through it.
Nancy, how about you? What advice do you have?
I would agree with all of that. I guess I would firstly say I think people have this misconception that the law school, because it is so well regarded, it's like it might seem to you as a student who's considering it, maybe this is out of reach, or maybe this is not for me. And I would echo what Isabella's saying. And yes, do read the website, do your research, and really have a think about whether studying this for 3 years or 3.5 years is something that you really can commit to. But I would also strongly encourage people that if they have any sort of solid interest in the law, to just go for it, because I definitely, when I was slightly younger, thought, am I really able to do this? And I went for it. I slogged it out and studied and worked extremely hard, and now I'm a graduate in private practice, and it was the best decision of my life, quite honestly. And I think it's important to be sure, but also to really just have the guts and the courage to just go for it if you think it's what you want, because you will likely, I 100% assure you will enjoy it, at least some aspects of it, if you take the time to think about it and just give it a crack, quite frankly.
I like that. Give it a crack. And I think that's a message I think everyone should sort of take out of this. It's like, you never know until you have a go and try something, or, and I think a lot of students that I guess I speak to, and, you probably might have been through a situation where you self-doubt yourself. You think, am I up to it? Like, I'm doing my undergraduate degree. Yeah, and you think, you're doing your arts degree, or your dance degree, or design, or whatever you're doing, and you're going, okay, I'm interested in law, but am I prepared to back myself? Am I going to have that? And I think that's the biggest barrier for a lot of students, is that first initial step of actually, to take that deep breath and go, you know what, I'm going for it. And I think that's would that be something that probably you guys were kind of in that sort of same spot sort of thing? Was there any kind of, nervousness about that? You sort of did point out that.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I have imposter syndrome at school.
Me too.
But I mean, I think what really grounds me is the fact that your peers they come from all walks of life, different socioeconomic status, different undergraduate backgrounds. I've got a friend in my class who is in a band. It's people come from an array of different backgrounds, and I think that in itself makes it a less intimidating environment, because it's not I guess, this elitist institution that you would perceive it to be. I guess that's what I perceive it to be, and I think I hesitated because of that. But I think you do realize that people are quite down to earth during the JD, and the fact that
Yeah,
it is
yeah,
community speaks to that.
yeah. I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I should also point out, like, literally no one in my family is a lawyer or involved in any way in the legal industry. So I had no reference point and zero contact with the legal world before I started the degree. And I think Isabella is spot on with her observation that people do, quite frankly, come from every walk of life in that student cohort, and that as well is what makes the JD more interesting to me, because I found in the 3 years I was studying there were people with perspectives that I just could never have had because I hadn't had an undergraduate degree in, for instance, microbiology or classical music, which 2 of my colleagues had. And it sort of, it just allows you to learn a law degree in a way that is just so it's so detailed and so vast in terms of what people bring to a class discussion or a perspective on a legal principle. And I think, having applied a lot of what I learned theoretically in my day-to-day work now with legal research tasks and other sort of things I do here in my job, I can safely say that I'm so much better for having that experience at law school than for having not had it.
So I guess the take-home message for all those people playing at home is have a crack and back yourself. You know, if you're genuinely interested and you have that passion for law and want to make a difference and you want that intellectual challenge, absolutely go for it. So, which is really good. So I guess we'll go to some questions that have sort of started to come in on chat. Let me give us a few questions here. This is a sort of an interesting one here. You guys could probably answer this. Does being a law student and practicing lawyer involve large amounts of reading? This is the big thing. Like, even people hear about these things that you're just reading constantly. Is that a myth, or is it a fact? Nathan, I guess you're the one that's kind of
Look, a little from column A, a little from column B, so to speak. I think it would be misleading to say that there is not a lot of reading, but I also want to make the point that it's also a skill that you learn on how to read effectively. So when I was a student and I was starting out, a lot of the legal cases I would read were, 20 pages long, and I'm talking A4 size, 20 pages long, in quite old world English language. But you develop the skill to be able to detailedly skim what you're reading and read quickly and pick out important pieces of information. I mean, I in my job now, I still have to read legal cases. I still have to read contracts, clauses, and pick out important points or issues that are relevant to a client's matter or proceedings. But it's a skill that the law school and the degree itself just teaches you innately. So yes, there is a bit to do, but it's a skill that you get on top of quite quickly, surprisingly.
Do you concur with that, Isabella? A lot of reading?
Yeah, absolutely. I won't lie, there is a lot of reading. However, like Nathan said, this is something you do get better at. And yeah, I mean, in my first year of law school, I'd spend hours poring over these pages, when in reality you learn to really effectively develop skills on how to read a case efficiently and pick out the key points. Because at the end of the day, that's really what matters. And I think it's a skill set that you really do develop over time. And now it's less intimidating, to sit down with a 50-page reading to do, because you know that, you can get through it, but it does take time to develop, I think, that skill.
Okay, let's go to one question, because we're sort of running out of time here. This is one that's very interesting, kind of along that sort of path there. Is law an intense and content-heavy yet dry subject like VCE legal studies? That's probably a bad rap for VCE legal studies. Is it dry and intense law? You know, discuss, Isabella. You're in it now. From a student point of view, is it dry and intense, or is there some light at the end of the tunnel? There, is it sort of is it kind of nice fun? Is it all kittens and puppy dogs, so to speak?
I actually didn't do VC legal studies, but I can definitely say that it's not as dry as you think it might be. It's intense, but I think what gets you through it is the fact that often a lot of the content you're dealing with has a lot of nuance. You're reading judgments, you're reading honestly like incredible pieces of law or legislation that really is grounded in it's like a real world change or an impact. I think that's what makes it super interesting, the fact that you can really do see the tangible impacts of, let's say, a judgment you read in the case. I think being able to kind of extrapolate the theory of a case and seeing that in the real world is what makes law really rich and quite exciting. So yeah, I mean, often you do lose that perspective when you're 50-page deep in a reading, and it does feel a bit dry. But then I think stepping back from that and realizing that what this, property law legislation means in the context of the grand scheme of things, I think perspective does make it less dry and does, I guess, inject it with a lot of interest and richness that the law is.
Nathan, you're now a lawyer, graduate lawyer. Is it dry?
Yeah.
Is it what's it like?
Look, honestly, there's always going to be one or two subjects or one or two areas of a subject which really just don't interest you. I mean, that's kind of, not everything can be sunshine and lollipops, can it? So I definitely think there are aspects of some of the subjects that put me to sleep, and they were a necessary evil. But for the most part, I actually think you don't come across that as much as you might think once you're in the degree. And I'll point out as well that a lot of the electives that you can choose in the law school generally tend to be things that you do have an interest in. So, for example, things like intellectual property in popular culture was a subject I took, which was all about copyright in music, art, and photography, things that I'm interested in. So reading 50 pages of a judgment times 4 cases every second night wasn't a chore because the content was interesting, and it made up for the other subjects where I thought, oh, is this homework going to ever end, because I can't stand it. So yeah, it's not as taxing a thing or much of a problem as it might seem, or as television might tell you law school is. Yeah.
That's the moral of the story, is don't trust Hollywood, I guess. So
exactly.
Well, team, I think we're actually close to finishing. I think we're running out of time for tonight's program. Thank you so much, Isabella and Nathan, for your time and sharing your experience at Melbourne Law School. And I hope everyone at home just got a bit of a snippet about what it actually is like to study the Melbourne Juris Doctor here at the University of Melbourne, and perhaps maybe kind of, I guess adjust your perceptions of what law school may be, or what it is like studying at Melbourne Law School doing the JD. So thank you so much, Isabella and Nathan, for your time and for this evening, and for all your insights. So thank you very much for that. We really do appreciate it. So basically,
no worries.
Hopefully, I know we probably didn't get too many of the questions this evening. So if your question wasn't answered or wasn't covered in the discussion that we had, please just, on the screen there, we have a inquiries link there that you can actually go and actually ask questions specifically about the Melbourne JD or about the law experience. And we'll be able to sort of answer your questions down the track. So please, if you do have an inquiry and or a question that didn't get answered or didn't get covered, please by all means send that through to us. What I also like to sort of say is, if you want any further information on the particular course, there is obviously the study website where you can go in and dive a little bit deeper. I know I just very sort of briefly covered the whole JD course structure and what it's like and all that. But if you really want that deep dive, go into study and actually explore the Melbourne Juris Doctor in your own time and, you know, in your own space, and you know, and see what it really is, and kind of take that information and wash it against what Isabella and Nathan sort of said. But lastly, I just wanted to thank you all for tuning in. So I really do I appreciate all your time, and especially in this sort of crazy time and you know, the world that we're in at the moment. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that you did get something out of this this particular webinar. And we're hoping that perhaps this kind of, you know, tweaked a little bit of an interest, or you know, ignited the passion maybe about studying law. But hopefully in the next 5 to 6 years, I would hopefully like to see you guys perhaps walk in the corridors of Melbourne Law School, and I could sort of high five you as you sort of go past. And so I really would like to say thank you very much for tuning in across Australia and around the world. So thank you very much. And also, if I'd just like to sort of say again, thank you to Nathan and Isabella once again for a great discussion. So thank you very much. So on that note, stay safe, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you at the next webinar that's coming up as well. Thank you so much.